Well, my friends, my name is Jason. This is the Outstanding Life Show. Here we talk about recovery. We talk about addiction. We talk about mindfulness. Today's topic, hitting rock bottom. What happens when we face triggers, that event crisis point, and that's where the trouble falls in. And I don't know about you. I know exactly what to say to get inside my head, to wind myself up, to really push my anxiety through the roof. I don't know if you can relate to this. I'm my own worst enemy. I know the habits that I've got myself into through my alcoholic brain, my addict mind. These are things that when I was in rehab, one thing we would say to each other, Jason, maybe what if you played the tape to the end? If you keep doing this, what is the outcome? And what's going to happen if you were to keep doing this? Is there any good that comes from this? Getting to the root cause of our emotion through consuming alcohol and other drugs, I reduced my life down to just feeling really, really happy and then feeling really, really bad. So I only have those two emotions and that's it, nothing in between. And then as soon as I started to sober up, I began to face all these other emotions in between. And it was very hard to manage them. It was very hard to try and digest them and make sense of them in treatment. We would need a lot of support. It's very supportive. It's very encouraging. But there were times when my ego gets the best of me. There's times where my anger, frustration, my resentment, they kick in. They're a part of me. It's not about getting rid of them. In recovery, it's not about abolishing negativity. It's not about abolishing or removing frustration. You're going to get frustrated eventually at something. I can't remove, but what I can do is I can take active steps to help manage when I don't. And when I'm just avoiding it, I just put it off until later. And I say, you know what? I'm just going to deal with this later. I don't have time to worry about my ego. I'm just going to delay that thought. I'm going to deal with it later. And as soon as I start delaying something, as soon as I start avoiding something, I'm now holding on to it because I'm taking that and I'm putting it in my backpack. But when I have 20 things, when I have 40 things, when I have 100 things, it's inevitable. I'm just pouring it on and I'm taking it on. Pretty soon, I start to look for it. If I'm feeling anxious, I'm looking for anxiety. If I'm feeling angry, I'm looking for anger. If I'm feeling upset and emotional, I'm looking for those things. And it sounds absolutely silly. It sounds bonkers to say this out loud. When my emotions are getting the best of me, the worst case can happen, and that's hitting rock bottom. That's when my bag fully falls out. The camel that breaks the camel's back, the camel that breaks the camel's back, the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm not able to manage it on my own. Everything, I dumped all my cards on the table. I'm now sitting in this raw emotional state. It's in that moment I begin to wonder, how did I get here? What caused this to happen? I was having a conversation earlier this week with somebody, and we were chatting about what happens when we have certain emotions. They quickly identified they were feeling a raw emotion. One emotion was driving another emotion, and that emotion was driving another thought, and that thought was pushing forward its own narrative until pretty soon what started as this one tiny little conversation erupted into this whole other thought process. In addiction, in recovery, there's always going to be tolerances of managing our emotions. There's always going to be that fine balance of delicacy. Hitting the rock bottom is something nobody wants. Waking up from hitting rock bottom is one of the worst feelings ever. The reason why it's so painful and the reason why it's so difficult is because the only person that I can blame for getting to that moment, the only person responsible to that outcome is me. And that's a very hard pill to swallow. Ego, it's driving the narrative, manifesting itself. I'm paying homage to it to the point that it's driving my decision-making process. It's pushing away my family members and friends. I'm losing the job, I'm losing the girl, and none of it is my fault. When my ego and my pride drive themselves so deeply into my life, and then everything else starts being pushed away, this is the beginning of hitting rock bottom. It's not until you've lost the job or the girl, or you lose your house, or it's measured in loss. Loss for one person might mean the world to them. In the alcoholic brain, in the addict mind, measuring loss is big, but individual battles are lost along the way. Culminate those tiny little battles, those little tiny losses add up to hitting rock bottom. And it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible thought because it's in that moment when I wake up from hitting rock bottom. I don't understand why I'm there. I'm feeling really bad and really crappy. That's where I'm raw. That's where I'm open. And that's where I become willing. willing. And the next part is, am I ready? Am I open, willing, and ready? Am I brave enough to ask for help? Am I brave enough to have the capacity to seek for assistance outside of my ego? Is there something bigger than my pride out there? Admitting that there's something bigger than me, recognizing it, and then reaching out for help. That's the foundation around the early stages of recovery. But it's not until I hit rock bottom that I'm in a position where I'm ready to move forward. There were conversations people would have with me, and they would come from a good place. And it didn't matter if it was my parents, if it was a friend or my girlfriend. They would say, you know what, Jason, I think a habit has become a problem. And because I wasn't open, willing, and ready, I had the blinders on. I don't know if you can relate to this. Once I have blinders on, there's nothing that's going to get through my blinders. There's nothing that's going to overcome my ego. There's nothing that's going to seep its way through my pride. As I've built this wall up and I've pushed everyone away, it's created a moat and nothing is going to get through it. So what has to happen? Well, the moat has to be dried out, the walls have to crumble down, and there has to be this raw, sore emotion that's sitting in there, and then it becomes open. And then when it's faced with nothing else but to grow, that's the moment where you've hit rock bottom. That's the point where you reach out and you say, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to move forward. I don't know what direction my moral compass is facing, but what I've been doing so far hasn't really been working out for me. What can I do to make this better? This is what rock bottom is. This is where I would say the eyes become open and I'm now in a position where I can move forward. Whereas before I couldn't do that with my resentment, my bag of ego, my bag of pride. These things don't have room in my life anymore if I'm going to fill it with something other than ego. I need to make room for gratitude. I need to make room for healing. I need to remove the people, places, and things that are not adding value. And I'm not able to do that if I'm just carrying around this bag of like emotion. Rage isn't really an emotion. It can get out of control pretty easily. And I'm speaking from experience, and I don't know if you can relate to this. Hitting rock bottom is all sorts of lameness. We've talked about what it is. We've talked about how we get there. That's the honesty. I can no longer do things the way I used to. My 2.0 operating software needs to be upgraded, and I can't do that if I'm just living my life in denial. That sounds really mean to say, but you know where I'm coming from with that. Here's the next one. Getting out of rock bottom. It's not like I can use a shovel and dig my way out. It's gonna take those walls that I built up. They didn't get built up overnight. So it's gonna take more than an overnight to tear them down. Brick by brick, I built this wall. So brick by brick, I have to take it down. And through taking it down, I start to appreciate what caused me, the Jason from 2002, the Jason from 1997, you know what I mean? What kind of person would need this wall to be built, and what part of me was being fulfilled through building this wall? What good came from building this? And through asking these questions, through digging deeper beyond the wall itself, what if there's something more than just, I don't want to call it ferocity, I don't want to call it shame, but there was a story through conditioning myself through that story, through telling myself I'm not deserving of good things. Like I would tell myself I'm not worth a sustainable lifestyle, healthy relationship. These are weird things to say, but when you don't value yourself, when I don't value myself, I don't give a lot of room for value to creep in. So when it comes to moving away from hitting rock bottom, it doesn't mean just tear down the wall. It means recognize what part of me was being fulfilled through building the wall in the beginning. Maybe, this sounds crazy, maybe it was meant to be out of a defense mechanism. Jason now, here we are, Jason in 2021 looks back at younger Jason 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. The younger Jason needed this wall to survive. And maybe it did. Maybe I did survive. But there's a point where this wall might have helped me at some point. But is it serving me now? Is this wall of protection keeping people out just as much as it's stopping things from getting, you know what I mean? Like what if this isn't serving me? What if it's not serving others? What if it's not serving the greater good? And if none of these things are being fulfilled, I start to look beyond, cause me to build the wall, and it starts to shape the foundation I have so that I don't have this in the future. And I'm not saying I'm never going to have another wall in the future, because I don't want a second wall. I don't want to hit rock bottom a second, a third, or fourth. It was hard enough the first time to hit rock bottom. I'm still learning learning, I'm still developing, but I'm certainly not the same person I was. But in my active addiction, you could have sat me down and had a clear conversation with me. You could have had Bill Nye the Science Guy with his spreadsheets and his flow charts and have a well-lit argument, and I wouldn't have listened to either of them because I wasn't in a position to be open, willing, and ready to grow, to see beyond my ego, to look beyond my pride. I was more focused on the narrative. I was more focused on just surviving, white-knuckling my way through. And yes, white-knuckling got me through, but I didn't know that at the time, and that's why I hit rock bottom, and I needed that. I needed to hit rock bottom so that I was in a position to move forward. And I'm thankful that it only cost me as much as it did. I did lose time. I did lose friends. I did lose a lot of family. It took a long time to earn that trust back, but it's not over. I still have a chance to turn things around. I still have the ability to grow. Nobody ever has like a rock bottom party. No one goes out and celebrates. Like, I hit my rock bottom today. This is amazing. No. Often the rock bottom party happens the night before you hit rock bottom. Look how supportive the community is, right? It's amazing. What brings us to the meetings is unique to us. Whatever the stories were to get us that far. The reason why we stay is the same. It's the message of recovery. We were chatting about hitting rock bottom. We were talking about all things recovery. With everything we've talked about so far, is it possible to avoid hitting rock bottom? What happens when we avoid hitting rock bottom? I don't want to spoil it, but if you avoid hitting rock bottom, it's like the tree in the woods thing. A tree falls in the woods and no one heard it. Did a tree really fall? If I avoid hitting rock bottom and I put my head in the sand, did I really hit rock bottom? Was it really a part of my journey? If all I've ever done is just avoid doing something, have I really dealt with it? I like putting things in my rage knapsack. If I just keep throwing things in the knapsack, eventually it's gonna just erupt and like a volcano and explode everywhere. I've done that before, and it's not fair to the person that the most calmest conversation ends up just escalating to the most emotional thing. And it's horrible. That's from the resentments building up. That's from the ego filling up that bucket and not giving any room for anything else. Here's the question. If you were to go and lose a successful career because of your addiction, and let's say your career was not important, is that considered hitting rock bottom? Would that be considered a loss? I mean, in my mind, losing a career would be really bad. Losing a significant other from a relationship would be really bad. Family members, friends, trust, love, respect, all these things in my mind they carry heavy weight. If they don't matter to you, that's part of the rock bottom process? What do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because to me now, I'm like, family is really important. Family, friends, caring for them, health, safety, like these are all things as I've gotten older, me and my getting older age. If you never value things like career or relationships, if you never value them and you lose them, is it really considered loss? And if I don't value them and they start piling up, if I go through a bunch of relationships and I never value relationships, is it really considered loss or rock bottom? It sounds silly to just say out loud, because every relationship is important. Every person is important. I think that's my ego then talking and my pride driving the bus, because it sounds like I've shut that out. I've put the blinders because I value either myself more than I do relating to that other person, and that was driven by the addiction, that was driven by my alcoholic brain, my addict mind, and that was fed through alcohol and other drugs. It sounds crazy. As I look back now, I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I've been able to have such a supportive community, have such awesome friends, have such really cool people to hang out with that I can have these open conversations with. It's a safe place where we can share and encourage each other. And I made this video one time. I referenced normies. I have this normie friend, and I meant it in like a fun, joking way. And then afterwards, somebody sent me a message after watching the video, and they're like, "Hey, Jason, I really liked your video." I was like, "Awesome, way to go." And they're like, "But I have a question." I'm like, "Sure, what is it?" And they're like, "What's a normie?" I was like, "Wait a minute, hold on. A normie? Only a normie would ask, what's a normie? That's a normal person. A person who's not struggling with addiction or alcoholism or other drugs. It's a person who doesn't have the same kind of, I don't want to call it the same mindset, but I don't want to call it that they haven't struggled or lost, but these are things that don't happen to them, therefore they're normal." And they felt like I was making like an inside joke. And I was like, "No, it's not it. No, I don't mean, it's not making fun of you. It's more of a hang out with normal people too, not just alcoholics and addicts. Although they're the funnest, it can be a game changer." Like, I remember the first person I ended up, I don't want to say opened up to, but didn't anybody I was going to rehab when I went to rehab. I'm going on vacation. And they didn't tell anybody. And then I went off the grid for like 9 weeks. It was horrible. It was like the worst thing you should do. So when I came back to work, people were like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. I can't wait to hang out with you. And it's so much fun. And then one of my friends, I didn't talk to them in a while. She's like, hey, you know what we should do? We should go out and celebrate back. I'm like, cool. What do you want to do? She's like, well, let's go out to this bar and I'll meet you there and we'll just have a blast, just like old times. And I was like, no, I can't. That's not a part of who I am now. And that was that was the first of many conversations I would have about, that's not, I do want to hang out, but I don't want to hang out at the bar. I mean, hang out at bars isn't bad, but it's like the whole suggestion that they made kind of put me off because I was like, just told you I was 9 weeks sober and you're taking me up to the bar. Like, it's not really supportive. So I had to make that line in the sand. I'm not going to hang out with you at the bar. I'll hang out with you somewhere else. I think it took me about a year before I went to like a Christmas party. Yeah, the relationships is it takes its toll on my soul. I don't know if you can relate, where I want good things to be there for good people. There's a part of me that's like let down as soon as it's not. As soon as I see that in someone else, maybe they're not happy, maybe they're not having fun, maybe they're not. It can also be like you've invested time and we've grown a lot. Then there's a part of me that's like, well, what if we've grown apart? And I look back now and the train wreck of relationships I had been in, I feel that there's those past relationships, what I've learned from them has helped shape me into becoming the person I am. I'm not blaming that entirely on the relationships. What I'm saying though is I've learned through, putting my hand on the stove and burning myself that stoves are hot and I shouldn't do that. In causing other relationships and being responsible for things falling apart, I've become aware of what certain impacts are, like burning your hand on the stove. There's more to this. In order for me to relate to somebody else, I first need to be relatable. And I can't do that if I'm pushing people away. I can't do that if I'm just focusing on just myself, or if I'm just tunnel vision on something. There's more to a relationship than just me. And that was a hard thing to get through, like come to terms with. Even now, I don't want to say like there's no rush. It's not an easy pill to swallow. When it comes to losing that relationship, that is a heavy toll. That's right. One of my favorite, Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins has like a thing where he says, in order for you to take the beach, like if you're in the army and you're rushing the beach and you're on the boat and you have to take the beach. And he's like, you're not going to take the beach unless you burn the boats. And I was like, well, that's a really weird analogy. What do you mean? Unless you have the motivation, unless the pain of staying where you are is so strong. Like we know pleasure is going to pull us forward. Pleasure is going to want to move us in that direction. But unless we're equally facing unless we're facing enough pain, staying constant of who we are, we're not motivated to want to move forward. Tony's analogy about burning the boats, that gives us no other choice but to succeed, because you don't have a boat to go back to. You now have no other choice but to push forward. Like the Eminem song, like you got no other choice. You might as well keep going. I remember leading up to hitting rock bottom, I was torn with the idea and I was like, what if this is bad? Like what if the alcoholic brain is actually running amok? What if at the time I didn't know it was my ego, but I wasn't in a position to admit that I had an ego? So if you don't know what it's called, do you know what it is? I was more afraid of being judged by my friends, by my family. And if I told them that I was an addict, that they would suddenly not care Like they wouldn't love me. They wouldn't be my friend anymore. That fear drove me. I think I might have a problem. And then I was more afraid of what my friends and family would think of me. So I just didn't bother telling people I had a problem. I would just keep doing the thing that was bad. And then in doing that, that is perpetual, like throwing it in the rage bag we talked about. Like it doesn't help anything in avoiding dealing with it. I went full force, 0 to 60 into rock bottom. And I was more afraid of what other people would think of me, more afraid of what my family would think of me, that I would be considered weak somehow. I can't explain it. I don't know the rationale behind it. Does any of this make sense? And in that fear, in that hesitation, I let it grow. And in that fear, it festered. It's like Yoda. It led to the dark side and it just festered until I became a Sith Lord. I don't know. This is a bad analogy, but you know what I mean. This is what happens when the alcoholic brain is making decisions for me. This video is about hitting rock bottom. My name is Jason. This is the Outstanding Life Show. In the meantime, you take care, you have fun, and I'll see you in another video. All right, friends. Bye.